Hey, why you trying to steal my pumpkin, dude? Whoa, don't come inside. No, you just stay there. Haley, get upstairs now. Take her upstairs, please. Whoa, dude. Whoa. Hey, don't eat the pumpkin. You are ballsy, dude. Take her upstairs, please. Sorry. Hey, why you trying to steal my pumpkin?
I tell you what, I would be absolutely terrified in that situation, but that dude was pretty chill about it. Um, Maybe I wouldn't be terrified. I don't know. I don't get terrified about other big ungulates. They're, but other big ungulates aren't mooses, so there is a balance to be had there. I think I would feel safe within my door frame. I don't think it could get its, at least not easily get its head through the door frame to get me. So that might be an awesome experience, actually. Unless I worked really hard on the pumpkins. I used to do pumpkin art where you not just carve faces in them, but I would do my favorite thing to do was I do scenes from horror movies. I did a rather lackluster version of the Evil Dead with the woman crawling out of the grave once. I've done probably half a dozen Friday the 13th Jason hockey masks. That's like what I've done the most of. Um, I've tried to do a lot of things that failed too, and I've done Chucky that didn't turn out great. But yeah, I always try to, or I always tried to do that. So if I worked hard on one like that, um, oh yeah, I did the Punisher skull. I did a really cool Punisher skull. I did a really cool Spider-Man too, because it's all about figuring out what depth you want to go where. But anyway, I've been going for 2.5 minutes and I haven't even said welcome to Live from the Hive. Half an hour late this morning. This is the first time ever that we've been more than 10 minutes late on getting the show started. When I came over to the computer this morning, wiggled the mouse to get things started before I went to do my bathroom routine, right? Um, Everything looked good. Uh, Sometime when I was in the bathroom, it went into a update mode where it does its does its updates. I was like, when I came back in here, I had only 10 minutes left, so I'm like, no, I'm gonna abandon the update. And we're just gonna go live, and I'll do the update after. Bad idea for Bree to do something like that because the computer totally freaked out. I couldn't even get the monitors to come on or anything to come up on the screens. I had to do several hard restarts. I screwed it up. I screwed that up because I should just let it do its restart because it would have been done before 9:30. But lesson learned. I can blame it on the machine elves who are gonna be part of the show in just a few minutes. So, but first some housekeeping stuff because uh, yeah, I tried a new hairstyle, so tell me if it's cute or not. I know I've had pigtails before, but these ones are. I need to wash my hair. It's been a couple of days since I washed my hair. Um, I'm trying to restore my hair, so I'm not washing it as often as I shower. So it does get wet and then it gets kind of lank, but whatever. That's enough about that. Yeah. So we had the computer glitch this morning. Um, but there's also wonderful things in the works as well for the future of the hive because we will be spending the holidays with one of my best friends in the whole world. I don't know how else to describe him. Robbie is that's Math Pig for anybody who doesn't know. I think everybody knows him as Robbie though. Yeah, thank you. Look at the trees. I appreciate that. Um, I I try to work on my appearance. I do like doing that. It's stuff that I wasn't, you really weren't allowed. I don't know. I wasn't allowed to do when I was presenting as a boy, and I get to play with my hair and stuff now. So anyway, what was I saying? Yeah. So Robbie is flying into St. Louis on the 22nd of December. He is spending time. He's got a girl over here. I guess it's a cat's out of the bag on it. But he's dating Savage Minnow, who is a St. Louis area resident. So he's flying in to see her. And I don't live very far from there, so I'm going down there too. I'm gonna go down and visit him at Christmas time, I think, and then come back down again at New Year's the next week or 1 week later. New Year's 7 days after Christmas. So I'm going down there and I don't know, just hanging out and visiting for Christmas, and then going back down, and we're actually getting an Airbnb for New Year's. So that's going to be fun. That is where I believe that's where I'm going to do a little live from the Hive from. It won't be an actual full show on that morning. So what day is that? Let me see here. So the live from the Hive, that will be broadcast on the 31st on New Year's Eve. Will not be a full episode with the full segment. It's just going to be just probably me with the peoples and just talking to them and talking about stuff. So that'll be a fun episode regardless. If you are in the area at either of those times, either around Christmas or around St. Louis or around St. Louis area, if you're around there around Christmas, the Christmas weekend or New Year's weekend, let me know. And yeah, we may be able to meet up for a coffee or something. I just have the small following, so and yeah, I meet just about any of you guys in a public place to say hi. We're going on museum tours and all that kind of fun stuff. Yes, it's going to be hard for me to stop myself from acting like a tour guide. I do that when I go to museums or zoos or aquariums, or I think that I'm teaching people about stuff, but really I'm just some weirdo that's talking to strangers when they're not they're not interested in what I have to say. That's why I come on here and talk to you, because you guys do care what I have to say. The people at the zoo don't. Sometimes they do. I mean, I've engaged with a few people about animals, but no, I just need to not do that. Like, especially, oh my gosh, when somebody's in the museum or a zoo and they say something wrong. Oh my God. Oh, did you know? Look, honey, that's an ostrich. Did you know that when they're scared, they bury their heads in the sand? I don't have my glasses out. I'd be like, actually, no, I shouldn't do it. Shouldn't do it. Should not do that to people. When they're misleading their kids. No, that's not really. That's what's going on inside my head, but that's not what I do in public. I actually, you know what I do when that happens? I try to talk to whoever I'm with and say, hey, did you know there used to be an urban legend that ostriches buried their heads in the sand? That's not a real thing that they do, though. Then that was just a good good example of one of the things. There's other things that people will bring up too. But for the most part, it's just ridiculous urban legend stuff like that I find myself being resistant to. Or if somebody says, like, sees the tigers, look, the tigers come from Africa or whatever. There's signs in that most of the exhibits. So zoos, I might as well say something about zoos while I'm on the topic, and maybe that needs to be no, I'm going to do we're going to talk about zoos for our environmental thing next week. So I've just decided that just now. So we're not going to do that here and now. Just because of that. Is Amy Newman really live? She usually goes live so late. I wonder what she's talking about. Now I'm kind of anxious to go over and see. I just saw it in one of my in the sidebar there. Anyway, I have there are ways to ethically visit zoos, and ethically run zoos. So make no mistake about it, it's a real thing that we can do, in for the betterment of the ecosystem. That's something we can do and something we should do. So I will talk about that next week. I did not. Oh, she just ended. Okay, cool. Who was debating? Let me know. Let me know, and we will maybe check that out. But I always like a good debate. I'm one of those rare people. I know I've had lots of people say to me that they don't like debates, and I get it. I do. Debates don't prove anything. Debates are like it's like sports ball for the brain. It's not. It's a game. It's a sport. It's not. It's a mental sport. It's like a mathlete or a. I was never a mathlete. I was a geography champion though. So there's that. I was a geography bee champion. So was my brother, because we grew up with a big old stack of National Geographics and Lifetime books. So anyway, it was Sci 10. Oh, never mind. I don't want to watch that. I mean, I love Amy. I actually, instead of debate platforms, I like what me and what was her name, Rubik's and Cindy Lincoln did on Amy's channel last week. If y'all didn't watch that, go back and watch it, because so I'm wondering if I should mirror that. I don't think Amy would care if I mirrored it. I actually had friction with Rubik, who is, I think, a anthropologist, because she had a fundamental misunderstanding of monophyly. So, but I'm not like coming down on her about that. I don't know. She's nice. She's a nice lady, and we other than that, we got along just fine. But we did have a back and forth about that, and it was anyway. Yeah, I'll see if I can get that mirrored here shortly. Maybe I'll even get that mirrored tomorrow. I don't know. But we'll see. All right. So other than that, I went over okay. Oh, and the new PC. I'm getting a new PC. It's coming. Anonymous benefactor has gifted me one, because it does not at this time look like I'm going to get any of my old property back. So I'm not going to dig into that, but yeah, I'm getting a new PC. It's just we're restarting, refreshing, and I am at 800. I was at 810. I think I lost a couple of subs. I don't know, but I am fully intending to get things relaunched. So if next weekend I have the new PC, the life of the Hive is going to be an extravaganza. It's going to be woo. And then, yeah, I'm really close to 1,000 on this channel, so I hope that that trend continues. All right, so let's move on to that's a perfect timing. 10:14. We're 15 minutes in. I keep my show pretty well segmented, I think. All right, let's move right into Cryptic Corner. Because I've just recently heard this term, like in the last few months. I'm not going to lie and say, oh, it's something I'm aware of. No, this is something that's come to my attention just within probably the last 9 months. I've been hearing it. The first time I heard it, just wrote it off. Like I heard it on someone doing a call-in show. I don't know. Would have been a long time ago, but and I say a long time ago, so I'm like 8 or 9 months ago, someone talking DMT. It may have been cafe. It may have been Cafe. It may have been Ethan. But somebody just mentioned the term machine elves, and I just laughed it off. Machine elves. Okay, that's just something that one of the many things that you can hallucinate under the influence of drugs. But it kept the term kept coming back up, and it's like, I wonder where that was coined and where it came from. So I started exploring the origins of it. It has a deep origins back to like the '60s, but that's not it's not pop culture origin really. I mean, it could be to some extent, right? But it really came into fruition and really cemented itself in the public mind. This idea of machine elves via our favorite return to monkey, Joe Rogan, right? So Joe Rogan has his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, and Joe Rogan loves to talk about DMT. Pretty much with anybody who comes on his show who is willing to talk about DMT. So that is where it made its way into the public eye, right? That is where this idea of machine elves as a viable real thing comes from. So we're gonna watch just a little bit of that. I don't know, I might skip a little bit here, but it's about 10 and a half minutes. But this isn't what I was going to do my show on. I'm not just talking about Joe Rogan, because we expect this kind of stuff from Joe Rogan, right? But we have. I was researching this, and I kid you not, this is just because I've been researching this. I don't decide on a topic usually the same week that I do the show. That way, I can do a little bit of research into it. So the research I was doing, typing in machine elves, pulling up, I got the history of it, who the first person who coined the term, this Terrence McKenna guy, and all this interesting factoids. But then a couple days into my research, this new video dropped from the philosopher guy that you guys have probably heard of. I guess he thinks he's a philosopher. I don't know. What would you call Mr. Jordan or Dr. Jordan B. Peterson? Is he a philosopher? I know he's a doctor. I'm not like discouraging that or anything, but he dropped a new video on machine elves that I haven't even completely watched yet. I do love the crazy. I love listening to people personify natural phenomena. It's study in the human condition. Meaning, we have to have meaning. There has to be a reason and absolute truth. But we are gonna look at Jordan Peterson too. He has like a 12-minute video, and our boy Joe Rogan has about 11-minute videos. So let's dive in.
You want to talk about little people? Do you want to talk about the elves?
Elves?
The
Like
elves.
which ones?
The machine elves.
Oh, okay.
Because I want to talk to you
That
about it because I've been doing
resolution's
some
so
research about
crappy.
this.
Research?
Yeah.
What kind of research? Taking drugs?
I would never
me-
take drugs.
Let's see if I can't upgrade. There we go.
Drugs.
Oh,
Drugs. If someone's on drugs, they say, "What's wrong with him? Is he on drugs?
right.
Is he a drug addict?" You would never want
Crazy
to do that.
people.
Only crazy people do
Yeah.
drugs.
Yeah.
So, do you think you've done more to popularize DMT than anybody else? Do you?
True. Joe Rogan has again a show where he talks to everybody who's willing to about DMT. People who have no no affiliation with drug culture at all, and he'll bring up DMT and just talk about it with them. You'll be surprised how people are like, "Oh yeah, I've tried it." Like I guess when you're have celebrity status, that's something you easily get your way into.
Think that these elves are real?
I don't know if real's the right word. The question is, we look at consciousness and we look at like an intelligent entity as being in a physical carbon.
Let me know if there's like an echo or anything on the video. When I've been doing my editing, they keep coming back since the switched to where you have to do the check the box and you have to share it tab by tab to get audio. I've been getting echo really bad. So let me know if you're hearing that on the videos. It's annoying because I have to get it to sound listenable. I have to like snip every time I play the video and when I talk and balance the audio out. It's a pain in the butt. So let me know if you all are hearing an echo, because I can try switching the way I'm doing the audio around.
Carbon-based form that's in front of you that you can shake hands with or give a hug to.
Right.
When you experience what happens when you take dimethyltryptamine, you throw all that out the window because the environment itself is not it's not defined. It's fluid, meaning that it's changing constantly, but yet it seems far more vivid and far more real than this life right now. And there are these.
So an altered state of perception is definitely going to be more vivid to you, regardless of if it's more real, because your senses are not used to experiencing the world that way. So your senses are going to be on high alert. Everything, sense of touch, sense of taste, sense of smell, obviously visual and audio or audible interactions are going to be those are the ones everybody talks about. But your whole entire sensory system is on high alert because the world has suddenly changed. The rules have changed in your mind. The only hallucinogen I have ever experimented with was LSD, though. So that's often cited as a completely different experience from DMT, and I'm not trying to draw that correlation. But that was the experience that I had, and this was years and years ago when I was a teenager. But I can definitely say that I thought it felt more real, that the world felt more real under the influence of that particular drug.
Things that are there, and they communicate with you, and they seem to be really communicating with you, and they seem to also know all of your bullshit and be able to see right through you.
Yes.
But they don't seem to be you. They seem to be something else.
Right.
That's all we know.
Right, but I'm asking you what you think.
But that's what I think. That's all we know. There's no...
Just because they don't seem to be you doesn't mean they aren't you. I still stand firmly at the notion that these are entities that exist only within one's mind, much like the tulpa that we covered a few weeks back. These are entities only in the loosest term that you have called them up by the power of your mind. Okay, good, Tobin. Thank you. I'm glad you don't hear an echo. I was slightly worried.
You can't, like, you could say that's a well of souls. That's what happens when you die. That's the afterlife. That's a parallel dimension. These are aliens. That's how they can communicate with us. They're non-physical life forms that exist in these realms of light. We don't know. It's just,
yeah, and that's an argument. It would be an argument of incredulity from incredulity to claim that entities were independent of mind. It's much the same as like claiming that the universe was created from non-natural naturalistic causes. It's just you shoving supernatural into a hole of I don't know. Doesn't validate it or doesn't give it any more substance or truth to it. You're just, I hate to be blunt about it, but you're just making shit up and stuff, shoving it in there because of what you want to be true.
You're just guessing, right?
Well, I've been talking to people and I've been told the theory that we are 3D beings, but they're 4D beings. So that we're 3D projections of 4D beings. So when you're breaking the veil, you are perceiving the 4D space.
I'm going to speed this up just a little bit.
But that's all you could ever say. It's really just a maybe. You know, when people say, I know what that is, I am communicating with the afterlife, or I know what that is.
And we hear this in the machine elves and the DMT community in general. They talk about the fourth dimension as if the fourth dimension was something that they're discovering. The fourth dimension is temporal. The temporal dimension. It's time. It's time. It's moving forward and backwards forward or backwards temporally. That is what the fourth dimension is. They're talking fourth dimension like it's another visual dimension, another depth layer that you can experience that way. It is a depth layer that you can experience, called time.
As these are the real aliens. This is what happens when you're sleeping and people have these alien abduction experiences. What they really are having is an endogenous DMT dump because your brain does produce DMT.
Right.
But new research is showing that it's not just the brain that produces DMT. That it's they used to think it was the pineal gland, but now they think literally
it does have a high concentration in the pineal gland. There is the chemical components of DMT throughout the body of a multitude of plants and animals. It's a chemical compound that's found that's useful. So it has arrangements throughout the animal kingdom, and again plants. I haven't looked into fungus, but I do know that the chemical composition of psilocybin is very, very similar to DMT. So these chemical compounds are useful to organisms. Brains and extrasensory perception. It's whether it's chemical perception, audio perception, or tactile, visual, whatever it is. These chemical compositions are very good at generating the image inside of our brain, so that we can. Basically, your memory is generated by similar chemical compositions. That's why you don't actually watch a video of something that happened in the past. And I talked about this with Maudi. What was that, Thursday at 7? But the video's out there. Christopher Maudi. He is a psych and scent guy. He teaches classes. He has a lab. Really brilliant fellow. And and we talked a bit about sensory perception and how these chemicals in your brain are thought to, from what we understand, still a burgeoning area of science, that they are helping our brain to generate images of for our memory, like a storage area that pulls that up. You're not actually replaying what happened historically. You're using these chemical formulas to build images, to allow your brain to build images of what you can kind of remember. He used the example of like a sugar cookie, right? That you can go into your brain and pull that out anytime you want. That's when we talked about tulpas a few weeks back. It's a similar thing. It's basically like a controlled trip like this. You control that. You learn to through repetition and conditioning to control those chemicals in your brain a bit to create your tulpa and give it. And this is a legend. I don't know. I don't know where we came down on that on that. I'm still up at the air on whether the tulpas can actually access areas of your brain that you cannot. But that's the claim, that they can that because they're independent of all the main functions of your brain, that they can actually objectively reach in and pull out information. That was the idea about tulpas. We're going to see a similar idea with the machine elves as we move on.
The whole brain is producing it, and the liver and the lungs. So it's part of the human body. It's something that the human body makes. They've been able to isolate it in specific organs, but they think this really bizarre, super potent psychedelic compound is everywhere. And they also think it's responsible for dreaming. They think there's an amount of it that comes out while you're sleeping, while you're in heavy REM sleep. This is speculative.
Right. And if your body goes into a situation because what you're dreaming where you think you're going to die, it's going to kick that in too, because the DMT works in your brain. from the pineal gland, I believe, specifically in this case, when you have a near-death experience. There's a lot of research into that as well, because the people, what they experience under the chemistry in their brain when they have a near-death experience, it looks like it's the same type of chemistry in your brain when you do DMT. I'm not sure how deep that research goes either. There's a few articles out there on it, but I believe it's mostly based on case studies, which is a little different than based on actually doing the labs, because it's very hard to get a hold of someone experiencing a near-death experience right then and there and check the chemical composition of their pineal gland, because usually near-death experiences don't happen under laboratory settings. Yeah, I've never tried salvia at all. Never tried it at all.
They're trying to, but the thing is, there's parallels, right? One of the parallels to the psychedelic states and dreams is that they're very difficult to recall. They you wake up and it's the most vivid, you come out of the experience, right? It's the most vivid thing that you've ever experienced in your life. And then moments later, you're like, I don't remember what happened. It's just like a dream.
So you've never had, because everyone who takes it talks about the spirit molecule, right? How much it affects their understanding of reality, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
You've never had
spirit molecule. That's another one of these terms that I hadn't heard too much until now. Spirit molecules is basically what's allegedly being the stimulation of this whole idea is rooted there.
Lingering effects from the DMT experience cross over into meat space.
You mean tripping for no reason?
Or just seeing, the way I've been told is that, like, if you're on a highway, right, and there's all these billboards, you don't notice what those billboards are, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's suppose you're in a highway in another country, and you don't billboards. If you want another, after you take, you are able to see those signs, receive them, and read them. So that things in real life that you would previously been oblivious to, you now pick up on connections that you previously couldn't.
Well, I guess you could say that anytime you have a paradigm shifting moment in your life where you could have this from a near-death experience or the loss of a loved one, where you're forced to reevaluate everything and look at things through fresh eyes, that anything like that is going to force you, anything that's just so titanic.
I don't know what this has to do with machine elves. I'm bouncing forward if you...
The most reality highlighting experiences, because it makes me think about the buildings. Like, this is, I just take these fucking things for granted.
Yeah.
There's a 64-story thing in front of me, and there's these human catacombs, and people are shitting into these tubes, and they go.
This is why we laugh, Joe. Buildings are not. Anyway, yeah.
Down through the water, and there's pipes in the state of consuming and producing, and then adding to this weird techno society that we live in.
Okay, let me ask.
That's all from weed.
Okay, but let me ask you another question.
Okay.
Let's suppose I drew in a piece of paper. I drew you, and I drew me, and I drew a house, right?
Okay.
And
that, like, you know, his life, he has destiny in his life, and he has to fulfill his destiny, and they're working to fulfill his. I'm like, this is like some weird ego-driven idea of what's happening in this space. That he's like sort of he's forcing whatever that experience was to fit this mold of what he thinks of himself. And by the way, it wasn't very accomplished at the time, right? So thinks of this as like, it's, you know, delusions of grandeur, right?
Of course, yes, I know well.
Yeah. But this is, I think, a kind of what is wrong, but yet also tripping and seeing these entities and saying, oh, they're all with me, they're gonna help me, they're working with me on all of my plans, and this is all my team and another life. It was very strange. So I never felt like that at all. I've felt every time I've done it, it's like, here's all your bullshit.
Oh yeah,
look at you, loser. It's highlighted.
No, it's never
all.
like, you're so great and we're so honored to be talking to you, Joe Rogan. It's like, dude, get over yourself. No,
you ain't shit. Yeah.
But I thought that there are some people who basically become chiropractors of reality. So if he's like, you're going to help me achieve my goals and you're behind me, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
But if he's there to help them achieve their goals, that's a whole very different perspective.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So like that kind of thing where like just awesome things happen to you, not what you would want, but you're basically an agent of bringing about positivity and kindness.
Well, that's just a more of a, let's use this as an ideology to do basically self-help and things like that. That's that's a little different of an area than to say, oh, there's invisible beings that exist in reality, but you can't see them unless you're on DMT, that can and will help you restore balance to your life and take control of your life. And you'll have people saying, oh, the machine elves took away my depression, the machine elves took away my mental illness. And that's not a healthy way to deal with mental illness. Is it though? I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. Are they actually better if it's a placebo effect and it works? I don't know. Again, it's like what you're talking about here with chiropractors. This was a point in contention with my last marriage because we had chiropractor bills because my spouse was very adamant that chiropractics was a real thing and that it actually helped you. And I was and am still definitely under the opinion that chiropractics is BS. There's nothing to it. It's popping joints and charging a whole bunch of people. It's learning how to make these joints pop. And then charging people a whole bunch of money and telling them that when you popped it, it fixed it. Now, something's dislocated. Sure, a chiropractor can pop it back in place, but so can a doctor. So yeah. Anyway, let's wrap this up here. So I'm gonna see what Jordan Peterson has to say on the subject.
Yeah. Well, I think the more you can do good things, right? The more you can be an agent of kindness and positivity, the more you're going to literally spread out the fingers and branches of love.
Right.
And if you do that, and then you do have psychedelic experiences, I would imagine if you've made a positive shift like that, your experience would be much more positive when you go into that dimension.
Right.
Yeah. Catch new episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience.
No, we're not going to advertise for you, Joe. So that was Joe Rogan, of course. We all know him. He's been covered in CryptoCorner quite a few times. I think some Bigfoot stuff, and then he did some alien implant stuff. That one just went live last Friday, so it's kind of convenient that we came full circle back to him. What are you saying, Speed? Psilocybin, close your eyes, and the phosphines become the deep tapestry, and it evolves. That's amazing. Poetic. All right. So, yeah, our next little case study, again, we mentioned this earnestly because I was just stoked to see that when I started looking into this, none other than Dr. Jordan Peterson has an opinion on it. So I'm going to rewind this here and we're going to see what he says.
Carl Jung spent years talking to entities of his imagination, documenting that in books like the Red Book. He made that a visionary practice and had illuminating conversations with specters of his own imagination. But of course, he also believed that there was a collective element to those. And so you might say that, well, to the degree, for example, that we're each inhabited by dark impulses, we might say, well, we're...
So Jungian psychology, we're going to personify aspects of our personality. That's what we're going to do here. So I think Jordan Peterson is going to get into machine elves with this guy named Dennis McKenna. I don't know if Dennis McKenna is related to Terence McKenna, who coined the term machine elves. I imagine it's probably just a coincidence because McKenna is not a rare last name, but I'm going to speed Jordan up because he talks like me, I guess. I shouldn't complain about that because I do pause and think as I talk. I don't think Jordan Peterson's stupid either. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's stupid. I think that he found himself pushed into being this hero for the anti-science movement. He's reaffirming people who don't understand things and don't want to understand them by saying, hey, it's okay. Our psychology is arranged for you to not be able to understand this stuff. It's good. And they're like, okay, my ignorance is my power or whatever. Anyway, I'm going to get back to the video. I could rag on Jordan Peterson a little bit, but
each prey to the same demonic forces. That's one way of thinking about it. And they're the same, and they're transpersonal, and they exist to some degree cross-culturally, and they span time. And so these creatures of imagination can have histories and can inhabit us in some real sense, and they can do that collectively. And then, so that complicates things tremendously. But then I would also ask, in your investigation,
so the human brain having similar responses to chemical interactions is expected. If we didn't have the same experiences, that would be the anomaly, because we are humans, so we should expect that our experiences under the influences of certain chemical compositions, whether it's LSD, DMT, or psilocybin, we would expect to have at least some bell curve of experiences that people are having. Where they would be an overlap with the way that their experience played out.
Your long-term investigations of multiple ayahuasca experiences across different people.
It doesn't mean that it's an objective thing that's actually happening. That it doesn't confirm the existence of this realm with machine elves and anyway. One.
Are there any commonalities of entities that strike you as particularly significant? I know people talk about clown figures, for example, mechanical clowns in the DMT state, and
elf machines and this sort
elves.
of thing.
Yeah, exactly. The elf machines. And of course, that's complicated too, because once one person starts talking about it, that might increase the probability that other people would experience it. But have you seen
social contagion? That's another thing that I talked about with Christopher Mowdy on Thursday. If you missed that, you missed a lot. That dude is so brilliant. Christopher Mowdy, go back and watch it. I'm not going to lay it back out here, but
in commonalities of entity experience that would suggest the existence of something that is at least transpersonal, even though it might also still be subjective, whatever that means in such a context.
Yes, I have, and I think this exists in these shamanic traditions, and the ayahuasca is a particularly good example of that. And again, I have not seen anything that convinces me. I mean, I'm basically a Jungian, so I believe in the collective unconscious as this. It's a good model, this transpersonal realm of shared archetypes and all that. And then there's the individual. And I haven't seen.
And I am not a student of that. I don't think that it's actually a independent. The collective consciousness is independent. I don't think it is. I think it's genetic. It's what we pass down from our ancestors as far as epigenetic experiences, which, and I don't want to say it vindicates Lamarck, but it kind of does, because it means that the experience of the previous generations throughout their life did to some degree affect the development of the offspring. So that's epigenetics, and why we have innate drivers. Like a good example that I always talk about is the fear of spiders and snakes, because we have a natural aversion to that, without being taught that these organisms are dangerous or can potentially be dangerous. We already know subconsciously that interacting with those types of organisms are dangerous, which gives us an aversion to things with more than 4 legs or less than 2 legs, because snakes and spiders tend to pack venom that's dangerous to us. And throughout human development and evolution, we had bad run-ins with these organisms that made us decide that they are not to be trifled with. And it's passed on genetically. Same thing as is what they're talking about here with these archetypal notions of these entities.
Anything in the reports of the psychonauts that would not fit into that model, that says, oh well, this doesn't really fit, this is outside that model, and so that model's not valid. I haven't seen that. I think that it is. I think basically these entities, they are experienced as real, but they come from the collective unconscious. And if you look at the ayahuasca traditions. And there is an interesting book here that's very illustrative of this, which many people know about. It's the book that you're familiar with the artist Pablo Amaringo, the visionary Peruvian artist. He and Luis Eduardo Luna wrote a book. He painted his visions, right?
Morning,
He remembered
sweetheart.
all his visions in perfect detail, painted these visions. And Eduardo, and he
Where'd they leave the coffin? Jordan Peterson has this huge production staff. Look at the quality of his sets and everything. He left that this guy's coffin in there. That's kind of peculiar. Whatever.
he collaborated on a book called Ayahuasca Visions, the religious iconography of a Peruvian shaman. It's still in print. The book is remarkable because it's its typical
Hey.
coffee table style format with full color illustrations of
His fake name in
the
house.
visions on one page and Eduardo's descriptions in English on the facing page, dissecting the elements of the entities and everything else that you see in these visions, as narrated by Pablo. I mean, Pablo, Eduardo Luna was basically just the
Maya.
transcriber, but Pablo described in great detail, dissected each one of these paintings, and
Morning,
and there are
Kira.
about, I guess, 20 or so of these.
Well, let me clear my throat. I'm gonna leave myself in here coughing. I'm actually gonna set my coffee aside and drink some water though. But I'm live and not edited, so that's a little bit different. I guess I do leave my coughs in my edited videos, but hey, babe, I release 3 edited videos a week. I was just talking to Robbie about that last night. Not a lot goes into them, but I'm not going to go in there and nip out all the coughs and chuffs and everything. But there's somebody on Jordan Peterson's staff who gets paid like a lot to do that. I don't get paid at all to do that. So there's a difference there. That's what I was talking about with the audio stuff too. So like when I'm watching something like this, if y'all hear echoes or anything, let me know in the side chat, because I have like several videos that I've done in the last couple of months with this weird, obnoxious echo when I play the video. I have to balance it out. It's a pain in the butt.
These paintings in this book, and it's basically a course in vegetalismo. It's talking about vegetalismo, this practice, which is really an amalgam of many indigenous traditions and kind of mushed together into a mestizo tradition. But he describes these entities, they all have,
Which is a mix between the European traditions brought over, the European folk traditions brought over, mixing with the native traditions to build all the native traditions from the area, not just because independently they had their own traditions, but essentially when Europeans conquered, or not even before, well before the Europeans even first met these people, they suffered from a mass pandemic that wiped out 80% of the population. So they were already wiped. And that's the weird thing, because when the Europeans first came over here, there was all these big cities and empires and massive populations. It was they interacted with them like they did when they discovered Japan or India. These were civilized, these were civilizations. And then 20, 30 years later, when they're able to come back, all these cities are gone and have been enveloped into the jungle. And the traditions of the peoples that lived in this area were kind of mushed together as they were driven further and further back into the farthest reaches of South America. But when settlers started to arrive who weren't soldiers and weren't trying to kill them, they started to interact and mingle their cultures together between these immigrants from mostly Spain and Portugal to create the culture that he's talking about here. And it's very similar to like what the Catholic Church did with Maya, old Mayan traditions to create Santeria.
names, they have a particular appearance, the plants, the animals, even there are UFOs, there are all kinds of things in these visions. Pablo describes every one of them, and any ayahuasquero in training, in apprenticing under Pablo or any of these traditional ayahuasqueros, they're going to see these things. This is a cultural context. They're going to see these things, and what they see is going to be similar. So it's sort of like
Right, 'cause
Terrence's.
We're all humans with human brains. You say I think stories of little people are genetic memories of other hominids. Actually, think that they could be genetic memories of other primates for sure. I don't disagree with that at all, because out of Africa, right? Africa's loaded with primates, both hominid and other, and there were hominids great and small, so a genetic memory of those groups. Also, the genetic memory of the wild man, things like that. Yeah, all could be linked together, and that's what it's pulling out when you see a bear standing on its hind legs through the forest 40 yards away. Your brain pulls out that genetic memory that says, "Hey, our ancestors encountered two-legged humanoids that look kind of like that." So, yeah, and it starts to the memory, as you rebuild your memories of that again with these same chemical compounds, it builds an image of the hominid instead of the bear on its two legs. It couldn't have been a bear now because you remember it so clearly that it was a hominid, because your brain, when it caught a glimpse of that at that distance and through those trees standing on its two legs, pulled up this thought form, this archetype of that's buried in our human genes.
Self-transforming elf machines. I mean, Terrence says that, he has a huge voice in the meme sphere. Pretty soon, everybody's seeing self-transforming elf machines. That's what people see.
Postmodernism is tearing our world apart. The one thing that maybe
this video, I was going to mention this too. This 12-minute video has like a 2-minute long ad right in the middle of it. Where did we? Sorry, it's only a minute long ad, but still.
Personalities, and it seems to me that it's highly probable that the way that we organize is in the form of personality. So, I mean, and I certainly got a fair bit of this from thinking about Jung's work. I mean, if you're inhabited by a rage state, which I think is a good way of thinking about it, you might think, well, what form does the anger take? And the answer is, well, it has a personality. You might act like enraged people that you've seen in movies. You might act like enraged people that you've seen in your life.
And again, he's talking about personifying natural phenomena, right? Personifying your aspects of your personality. That's what he's talking about here. They aren't independent entities that are interacting with you. This isn't an outside entity that's coming in and wrecking your life. And there's not a actual entity of that is your anger. It's just if you want to personify an aspect of your personality, that's fine, but it's still all these things are in your mind. Projecting them as thought forms helps you to deal with them, and it works for you. That's great. But the notion that these entities that we experience on psychedelics are objectively real, and the fact that our brains react the same, and there's overarching the overarching characteristics of how people have these experiences is proof of that. It's not. It's proof that we all have the same. That we all have human brains that are going to react to chemical compositions the same way. Hey, Jay. And waiting for this guy to relapse. We had Joe Rogan before him, so all these people talking about their machine elves.
Life. The rage has a goal, which is the crushing of the opponent, let's say, and it has perceptions and it has action patterns. It's a personality, and you could conceptualize the rage spirit as Ares, the god of war, and that would be a perfectly reasonable way of looking at it. And
why would that be reasonable, though? Personifying it as Ares, god of war. Yeah, and I guess that's what. When I was a neo-pagan, that was kind of the idea about it. At least the way that I approached it was as that the gods were just thought forms that you could focus on and interact with the natural flow of the energies that those thought forms represented. But I was always in the position that I guess I've always been kind of an atheist on that, though I did have some woo-woo energy stuff tied into it that it took years to kind of cut ties with. But I digress. the idea that these things going on in your mind is fine. These are brain states that you can utilize to help you navigate the world around you, to help you deal with your emotions and process your thoughts and feelings. That's fine. But once we start telling people that there's an outside force that does this, and that outside force is telling you what's best for everybody, and you start pushing people towards that, saying, look, I've talked to the machine elves, I've interacted with the machine elves, and they say this is the proper way that the human brain should function, things like that. Once you start propagandizing what these entities have told you, that's when it becomes a problem.
It could be that all of our micro perceptions and all of our macro perceptions, for that matter, have the intrinsic form of personality, and that's partly what we encounter when we dream. And so I was thinking too, that as the gods, if the gods are aggregates of micro personalities, that might be one way of thinking about it. They're micro personalities that are aggregated within societies across time, and then can be apprehended collectively to some degree. As you move towards a monotheistic vision of the world, what you're moving toward is the ultimate aggregation of all these socially modified micro personalities into one conceptual scheme. And that would parallel that hierarchy of cognition and conception that, well, we already discussed, that people like Friston.
Did he just draw a triangle because he's going to start pushing Christianity? Because that ad was for the pops in the middle of this is about Judeo-Christian values and all that crap. Yeah, this is the word. Yeah, somewhere in here. Anyway,
are working on. And so it isn't that surprising, I suppose, if you think about it that way. If the brain is a personality producing machine, so to speak, that there are certain states that you can encounter under the influence of chemical alteration where you encounter those personalities, even those that have some degree of autonomy. I mean, rage has some degree of autonomy, and so does lust, and so does thirst, and so does hunger. They're not exactly you.
Yeah. They don't. I would not say that each individual. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's literature on this. I'd be happy if someone just wants to drop it into my chat or in the description down below and make this case for me. But as far as I'm aware, none of the facets of my personality, my anger, lust, rage, sorrow, whatever you want to, my joy, none of those have individual autonomy. None of them, not a single one of them. They are all conglomerate towards an autonomy that is me. None of them individually has an autonomy of themselves. The other aspects of my personality always get to weigh in. Now, when I'm upset, yes, certain aspects get a bigger vote, but they don't have autonomy on the way I react.
They're forces or personalities, which is a more accurate way of thinking about it, that you can fall prey to. And so why can't that occur in a more complex manner?
Well, I think it can. I mean, this totally fits within the Jungian model. That within the collective unconscious there are these I forget the exact term that he used, but these complexes, almost like autonomous personalities. And multiple personality disorder is a recognized.
See, and he used the proper grammar there, almost like autonomous personalities. See, Peterson will just present it as this is the way it is. These are autonomous personalities. McKenna's got a more open approach to it.
And I guess in some ways, all of us have it in a certain sense, in that we have, we do have these multiple personalities, but they, like rage, lust, and so on, but they don't take over the controls. Most of the time they're suppressed to a certain degree, but they're always there, and they're influencing whoever it is in the cabin, at the bridge that's running the thing. And in pathology, they can take over. And then you've got a problem.
Well, they do with Tourette's syndrome. They do with Tourette's. They do with obsessive compulsive disorder.
Exactly.
And you can think about the relationship between these motivational states like rage.
Yeah, those are disorders, though. So even when it's within his own interview with the people he's talking to, he's got the goalpost like over his shoulder, like it's Jesus's cross that he's dragging. He's running back and forth that goalpost. Because he's gone. I mean, look at how he's waffled about this. The independent, objective entities. Now he's conceding with the Dennis here that that they cannot take control of you. It's not an entity taking control of you, an autonomous entity.
Or anxiety, let's say, that
Unless
are
it-
transpersonal.
unless you want to consider mental illness as a factor, like he said, Tourette's syndrome or something like that.
In that everyone experiences. We know that with the psychedelic experience, that set is very important, and that if someone is in a negative emotional state or situation that elicits fear and, let's say, rage, and then they embark upon a psychedelic experience, that particular state can be
Hey,
magnified
Bjorn.
beyond belief. And so that's a good way to have a hellish experience. And so, you know, we do have to remember, and I know, of course, you do, that the psychedelic experiences that we're talking about are ritualized so that an absolutely dreadful outcome is less probable. But you might say if it was just done randomly, it could easily be the magnification of a state of terror or a state of rage as the magnification as a state of enlightenment or bliss.
Right. So this
would separate the rest of your personalities from responsibility if you can blame it on this internal entity that lives within you that you have no control over, that takes possession of you, if you will, and causes you to act. It's like an out. It's a free out.
is the importance of the ritual context. This is exactly
Right. I agree with this too. Tourette's isn't necessary. I don't know. I don't think that the what's expressed through Tourette's is a specific aspect of your personality that's taking over. Tourette's is a neurological tick in your I believe the way that your synapses fire. But again, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that's what causes Tourette's.
exactly that. What these traditions have grown around is the idea that there needs to be an appropriate set and setting. There needs to be an appropriate set, the most important variable, certainly. And I sometimes say in my talks, I say ayahuasca is a liquid. Ayahuasca will fill any vessel you create for it.
Ew, Daily Wire. Jordan Peterson, uncensored, now on Daily Wire. If you're into that sort of thing. Now, I did have a video from Terrence McKenna pulled up here. I don't have time to watch it, mostly due to the tech issues at the beginning of the show, but it's 30 minutes long. I may pop over to Discord and watch it after Life in the Hive. I don't know if y'all are interested in something like that. We can do that, but we are going to move into Creation Watch, but first we're going to play a quick game of Name That Bug. So here we go. And we're going to see if the Hive can name that bug. I'm going to let this play through a couple of times, and I'm going to pop away for just a second, okay? So watch this video. There's two of them in this video, so you can see both of them. And yeah, here we go.
I was cleaning my room a few minutes
play
ago,
through
and this
twice.
thing came right out of underneath my carpet, but where was a dead one of them? Oh my god, there's one of them. The other one went running, and I'm pretty sure it's right there. Oh my god, what do? I'm moving the shoe hole. There he is. Okay, you're just gonna move the shoe. See what he is. Okay. He just got away. What am I gonna fucking do? Oh my... I was cleaning my room a few minutes ago, and this thing came right out of underneath my carpet, but there was a dead one of them. Oh my god, there's one of them. The other one went running, and I'm pretty sure it's right there. Oh my god, what do? I'm moving the shoe hole. There he is. Okay, you're just gonna move the shoe. See what he is. Okay. He just got away. What am I gonna fucking do? Oh my... I was cleaning my room a few minutes ago, and this thing came right out of underneath my carpet, but there was a dead one of them. Oh my god, there's one of them.
All right,
went running, and I'm pretty sure it's right there.
let's have a look at this sucker. Hiding
do?
behind the shoe. I see lots of long limbs.
The shoe hole.
It's moving sideways like a crab.
There he is.
He's gonna move the shoe,
Move the shoe.
and
Let's see what he is.
we're gonna pause right there. Okay, we have some good guesses. Good guesses coming in. Vinegar Rune, you are very close. It is an arachnid. We have cricket, not quite. It will eat crickets. This is definitely a predator. It's not a vinegar rune, so I'm just going to put that out there right now. It does have some analogous traits, and it is also an arachnid and a fellow chelicerates. These guys are closer in phylogenetic relationship to opilions, harvestmen, daddy long legs, if you will, and share some the fused cephalothorax and abdomen. They're literally fused together, or they appear to be fused together. There is a bit of a area of movement there. These guys are pretty blind. They only have photoreceptors to sense light and dark, essentially, and maybe a little bit of motion. So they instead, because they live in dark environments, caves and under bark and things like that. These big ones like this, I used to have. These are they don't have a real good common name that fits them, that doesn't borrow from other clades of organisms. So they're often called the tailless whip scorpion, the whip scorpion being a name for the vinegar rune mentioned above. They are sometimes called whip spiders or cave spiders. They are not spiders. They are their own group called amblypygids. They are a very ancient order of non-venomous arachnids that is really no more dangerous to a human than like a praying mantis would be. They are fairly docile but skittish organisms, and they have raptorial arms to help them grab and crush their prey, because again, they have no venom. Raptorial arms kind of supplement the lack of venom. It also makes them brutal killers because they start eating their food before it's dead. As soon as they grab a hold of it and get their thorny little arms into it, they start consuming it. I had a pair of these that I bought in 2014, and they mated. Then the male died shortly after. Males don't live as long as females. The female's eggs never came to completion. She never gave birth to her live young. So she had the eggs develop inside of her, and then they kind of just stopped. And she lived for years and years after that, but never had babies. I got another male at one point and put it in there with her to see if they would breed, and they fought and it killed her, and then it died a few weeks later. I don't know what happened with them, but I haven't had an amblypygid since. I would love to have some in the hive at some point soon, but that's where we are on that. So name that bug. This is an amblypygid. Yeah, right. You did get really close. Vinegar rune is probably the closest you could get without saying amblypygid, at least in the aesthetically looking at them. Vinegar runes will have more of a elongated cigar-shaped abdomen, whereas the amblypygids are more lightly built, longer legs, and have a much smaller abdomen. It's because they're arboreal, live on walls and are in trees and on walls and things like that, and nocturnal. Whereas vinegar runes are mostly terrestrial and or fossorial, so they live on the ground or under the ground. But yes, it's like the same. It's like the same the same software run on arboreal or terrestrial hardware. Or I mean, yeah, hardware. Yeah. Anyway, let's move right along to our creation watch. This is a new person that I'm engaging with, and let me see here. First, I'll show you their channel just to give you an idea of who we're dealing with. This person's name is Tom Short. Seems to be an apologist, public speaker kind of individual. Has the typical counter apologetics that we're used to dealing with here in the Hive. We got the tragic story of Charles Darwin. How did life begin? But also more doctrinal review stuff like walk as Christ walked, and did God make everything? That's more did we evolve by chance? More evidentialism is what you're going to see there. Facing the impossible situation, bring it to Jesus, this kind of stuff. But today we are actually going to look at a very specific video, and let me pull that one up now. Come on. Here we go. And this, I bring this up because I talked to Cindy Lincoln, as I've mentioned earlier in the show last week, over on Amy Newman's channel, and there was this sort of layer of dismissal to the fossil record that I could not understand. Fossils don't prove blah blah blah. Did Mark guess amblypygid or pidgid? Did you? I'm sorry if I missed your guess, and I'm scrolling back up to see, because if you got it before I said it, I want to give you credit, Mark. Oh, you've been trying to spell it. Yeah, for a long time I called them amblypygids, but when I spoke to Walker, just a walking fish, who I haven't talked to in forever, I hope they're doing okay. Anyway, when I was talking to them about it, they let me know that the proper pronunciation due to its Greek origin would be amblypygids, so I started using that instead. Anyway, yeah, let's dive into Tom Short's exploration of the fossil record. Now, he's not a huge channel, 1.85 thousand viewers, so that's bigger than me, about twice as big as me actually. 160 views on this video alone, and we'll look at the comments maybe after we're done watching it. But let us blow this sucker up and give it a go. 17 minutes, but let me see. He's got an intro. Okay, just looking at the sections. I think we should be good to go. We're going to watch the intro too. See how that goes.
Good morning and welcome to our Daily Word and Prayer. My name is Tom Short. So glad to have you along with us today as we talk about the Word of God. And we're talking specifically about creation and evolution. Today we want to look a little bit at fossils. Now, this is a big topic, and I can't hope to really cover it fully here in the next 12 to 15 minutes. I'd like to share some things that might help you look at fossils in a little different way. When I ask students on campus why they believe in evolution, one of the most common things I hear is that they say the fossil record. And when they talk about that, they're usually talking about human fossils. And so I'd like to show you what they mean usually when they say the fossil record. Here it is. This is a similar picture of what I saw in about, I don't know, I was probably 10 years old, maybe 8 years old, the day I became an evolutionist. It was summertime. I had to read a book. Mom and Dad bought these Time Life science books, and I had one on evolution, and I saw a picture like this, and I opened it up.
I have a... Oh, I got to show you. Hold on, I'll be right back. So, let me just me just pull this up real quick. Just a second. I want to show you this. So, early man. I grew up with this book. I had the whole set, this whole life set. I think this is the set he's talking about too. Because I grew up with these, but I inherited it from my grandparents when they moved just recently in the last couple of months. Inherited the full set from them, and the only one that was missing was this one, because me and my brother wore it out reading through it because it has. Let me see. It's got the full chart in here. Wish I knew what page it was on. There's the OG of this image in here. It has some great. I mean, this is a great book. Look at that. Look at these. I've read this book through cover to cover. Yeah, you get it's a full version of this, is what he's talking about. So once we get, and as you go through, here we go. Oh my gosh, yes, here it is. Here it is in all of its glory. You get the full from Gibbons on up, and then ta-da, you get boom. Okay, this is the OG. This is where all of this origins come from, right? Or the big complaint about the way that's displayed in there. And it comes from both sides, and I can see the reason for the complaint, because people's expectations of what you're seeing in this book, and again, this is not new. This is this copy is printed in 1970. So this book is older than me by like 13 years. So it's an old book and old information, but it's nostalgic to me. But people like our friend here, Tom, are expecting that this like literally is a representation of, this creature right here on the left gave birth to the creature next to it, and then that creature gave birth to the creature next to it at some point. Like, not saying that every generation, like there'll be like 50 generations of the one on the left, and then all of a sudden it gives birth to the next one over, and then there'll be like 160 generations of that, and all of a sudden it'll give birth to the one. That's not how it happens. That's not how these transitions to occur. Subtle changes over time, over millions of years, over thousands of generations, small incremental changes that are imperceptible from each generation. You just picked this so you could show off your OG March of Progress, didn't you? Yeah, I kind of did. I didn't. I meant to have this book in here ready for me to show it off. Yeah, the March of Progress is just representation. It's not supposed to be hyper accurate, and that's why it's so easy to. And that's why I'm like, let's stop using it. But I love it because it's such a beautiful representation, right? But because the average person looking at it will feel like they're being misled or lied to because it doesn't actually represent functional reality. Then they dismiss the whole concept of evolution as a whole, even though it's just supposed to be snapshots of of development along a lineage. It's just supposed to be like, jump forward to the descendant, 10 million years in the future or whatever.
I sat there on the couch just as a young boy, and I said, well, that makes sense. The figure on the left looks like the monkey I saw in the zoo. Figure on the right kind of looks like my dad. It seems so obvious, so simple. It was in a book. It was full living color. What are their problems with this picture? Are there problems in this picture? I start off by saying, first of all, how do they know all this stuff just from bones? How do they know how much hair someone had from bones? How do they know skin color from bones? How do they know the reality?
They don't know the skin color and all that from the bones. They know the skin color from the latitude, and we can look at a map nowadays and see where skin color is driven almost exclusively by your proximity to the equator. So if we find bones closer to the equator, we assume that the organism had darker skin. If we find it further from the equator, we can interpret that it had fairer skin. This is not obviously not a hard fast rule, and people do migrate into areas and have not been in those areas long enough to go through those physiological changes, but many groups have. We've been spread all over our genus Homo has been spread all over North, all from I don't want to say North America. We haven't been there a lot long, but we've been all over Africa, Europe, and Asia, and into the islands of Southeast Asia for hundreds of thousands of years, developing these physiological characteristics and success of the darker skinned individuals as they get closer to the equator. But we've only been in Australia for 50,000 years, in North America for North and South America, I think it's for like 25,000 years. So those groups haven't experienced so much of this evolutionary process with the melanin in the skin. And also we've moved away from living so much outdoors and being in the exposed to the elements so much. So it's not as much of a factor anymore, though there are certain characteristics that it can cause a problem. But yeah, let's move on.
They didn't even have full skeletons of these animals. They just had partial bones or a hip bone or a thigh bone or a part of a skull or something like this. You actually go to a place like the Smithsonian Museum and you see how few bones they actually have and how much of it really is speculation.
Well, it's not though. It's because, yeah, for a hominid skeleton, generally we don't find a lot. It's very fragmentary, but remembering that humans are bilateral, so whatever you find of this side of the body is going to match on that side of the body. So already there, whatever bones you find, unless they are mirror images of each other, you have 50% more than what you would what you actually see. You have 50% more of the skeleton than what you're actually looking at. So when you see a museum display and it only has a couple pieces of the left side of the skull, maybe part of the eye socket, and then a full jawbone, we have the full eye socket. We have the full brow. Based on what we have just from that one side, because again, we're bilateral. So you have twice as many bones as you think you do when you visually look at it. Again, unless the one side it has an identical representation on both sides. So then you get multiple organisms, and they're not, the chances of them having exactly the same portions of exactly the same bones preserved in the fossil record is very slim. So you start filling in more of the picture. And again, each fossil that you find of a bilateral organism is actually two fossils, because there's one on each side. And I think a lot of people try to misinterpret how much we have of any organisms, whether it's dinosaurs or early hominids, based on the idea that we only have this little amount of the bones, but never consider that we actually have twice as many as what we physically have, just due to being bilateral.
And then you add in, not only do they have this artist's conception of what it looked like outwardly, but I look at the last guy in the picture, the most fully formed, most fully evolved of all. There he is, a Caucasian man. He's white. He's got a nice haircut. He's shaved. He's kind of got hairier legs than me. But if you stop and think about this, if it weren't for, Schick and Gillette or some razor company, he would have a lot of facial hair. He'd have long facial hair, just like the animals that he supposedly came from.
Right. He's supposed to be a modern man, and they're representing that by saying, hey, this is modern man, and he can shave and groom his hair, cut his hair. Yeah, it's supposed to be modern man.
And this whole picture of evolving, it's so much speculative and so much of an art conception. It's not really,
What parts of it are speculative? representative species for each of these organisms. Again, I have the fold out right here. So let's see. And this is not the exact same image, but it's really close. So I think that what we're looking at here is the Dryopithecus on the left, followed by maybe Ramnopithecus or A. africanus. I think it's based on its face. I think it's supposed to be the Australopithecine africanus. So it's supposed to be the I'm going to trip over my own tongue saying all these anthro words. Anyway, yeah. Australopithecus africanus. Good grief. I don't know why that was so hard. And then so it's not giving you, again, each individual step. Even in this, it's cut out a whole bunch of the steps. And then it gives you, I'm assuming that this is supposed to be like a Neanderthal because he's carrying the spear, or maybe Cro-Magnon man, because Cro-Magnon man is the one who carries the spear in my book. So they even skip over all the hominids. In my March of Progress, the OG one doesn't even have Erectus as a clade. It has all the individual finds of Erectus. Yeah, so it can't be your ancestor because he shaves, right?
I believe it's really accurate. But it leads us to the question, how do you even get a fossil? And as we want to talk about the fossil record, this is an important question that many people don't give enough serious attention to. How do you get a fossil? If you were to go, say you had an animal in your backyard or something, and it just fell over and died, would it fossilize? No, it wouldn't. What would have to happen for it to be fossilized? It'd have to be buried. It'd have to be buried in sediment so that it
doesn't have to be buried in sediment. It can be buried in ash. It can be buried in sand. So there are a few variables that can be carried by water, by the wind, or by volcanic or even tectonic activity. Caves are also a place where things can be fossilized in the open. So they don't even have to be buried. If they're in a cave that is isolated, the bones can mineralize in that environment as well. We have a pretty cool rhino that was preserved in a cave in a similar manner.
To take the minerals from the soil rather than decompose into the atmosphere or be eaten by scavengers, and so on. To fossilize, it must be buried. And so this raises a question. How did things get buried all over the earth? Because we have fossils on top of mountains. So
most fossils, at least sedimentary fossils, are found in, depending on what kind of fossils they are too, because like Lagerstätten is a whole different process. Amber fossilization is another process. But whatever the mineralization process that is undertaken, the most common, of course, being like he's talking about, buried in riverbeds or in lake beds where animals tend to get washed away. It doesn't have to be what he's going to claim here, a worldwide flood. It doesn't have to cover the globe. It can just be an individual rainy season. It could be a seasonal flood that washes organisms down to pile up. And we have these in real time today that didn't take a global flood. There's places where there's just washes full of bovid bones, for instance, just piles of them. It's because they die and get washed away. And when the water and the weight of the bones all collect in a certain area, and yeah, it doesn't have to be global. These finds are pretty common throughout the fossil record, both subfossil and fossil. So we know that when something is buried for thousands of years, it can still be subfossil. It still have still be bone specifically that's buried in these conditions too, but it's been buried long enough. So why do we have subfossil and fossil groups if everything was buried at the same time? I've always wondered about that. I know Mark Reed has the answer. So Mark, why do we have both subfossil and fossil bones that are buried in the same condition if fossilization is a universal process that happened across the globe during one flood? I know you've poked and prodded enough creationists to have this answer for me, Mark.
We have fossils, obviously, by riverbeds, but they weren't just, that's not the only place they fossilized. It's the riverbeds cut into the soil that allows us to find the fossils. There's probably fossils under the very ground you're on right now. If you were to dig down deep enough, there'd probably be fossils.
False. Absolutely false. There may be fossils underneath you. There may not. Depends on if you're in a fossil formation. Depends on if you're over a area where the formation had organisms that fossilized. Fossilization just doesn't happen all the time. It happens at very select points in time. Catastrophes are a good example of it. Again, we mentioned volcanoes before. Floods are a good example of situations that would cause that. Meteor strikes. We had the rainforest collapse was another one where the oxygen level went too high and the rainforest collapsed, and that's where we get our coal deposits. But there's lots of cool creatures in there. There is just amber. Amber happens sporadically. It happens. It only we find them more in specific environments. That's why we have specific formations like the Myanmar amber and things like that, Baltic amber. But the situations that cause these fossilization processes are varied and many. Yeah, Mark, I know that's our answer to it. I know that's absolutely our answer to it. That they haven't had enough time in that environment. I wanted to know if you knew if you'd ever heard a creationist response on that, because I know you engaged them about this topic specifically quite often. I didn't know if anybody had ever explained to you why we have some bones that are fossilized and some bones that are subfossil. Our uniformitarian, as they would call it, explanation is that subfossil ones haven't been there as long as the fossilized bones, and I think that pans out and that makes sense, because we see more modern, like more organisms that are more modern leaving, or we find subfossil finds, but organisms that are less modern, we find only fossil finds like dinosaurs. Interesting that. Oh shoot, let me jump back. Where was I?
By scavengers, so on. To fossilize, it must be buried. And so this raises a question. How did things get buried all over the earth? Because we have fossils on top of mountains. There
are, again, lots of factors for how something could get buried.
We have fossils, obviously, by riverbeds, but they weren't just, that's not the only place they fossilized. It's the riverbeds cut into the soil that allows us to find the fossils. There's probably fossils under the very ground you're on right now. If you were to dig down deep enough, there'd probably be fossils underneath right where you're at
that's
today.
Where we were. Okay.
There are places like you see where there's been dinosaur digs, and you've got like big dinosaurs. How do they get buried? How did these huge animals get buried so that we could find their bones?
Yeah, a lot of factors, but you got to also remember that these organisms lived millions of years ago, and the main composition of soil is the remains of organisms. Soil is organic. So after Kent Hovind seems to have this. Where does the new material come from? Does it come from space? No, it comes from organisms growing and dying and growing and dying. It comes from plants and fungi and animals too. Living their life cycles and dying and accumulating the mass of their what remains of them after scavenging and elemental degradation of their physical forms. They turn to soil. It's the same reason why your sidewalk, why if you don't don't trim the edges on your sidewalk while the grass creeps over it, and then if you let it go for a couple years, you lift that up and there's dirt underneath there. That's the decay of previous generations and elements. And it confuses me that they don't understand that, and that's a couple years on your sidewalk, right? A couple of years, yeah, your sidewalk gets buried. There's sidewalks that are buried completely. There's sidewalks that are buried under inches of dirt after just a couple of centuries of just sitting there, not anything happening, and just plants growing over them and dying back, going over and dying back. Soil overtakes them. Gravity acts on them. They find their way under the ground. It's not a hard process, and millions of years past, they may find themselves several feet, several meters underground. That's to be expected.
You go to a place like Dinosaur National Monument, and you find deep burial ground of these dinosaurs. Well, obviously there must have been some sort of cataclysmic event that buried them. We believe that cataclysmic event is found in Genesis chapter 6 through 9.
Right, and that's under the presumption that how much deposition is over top of them now is how much deposition has been over top of them the entire time that they've been since the organism died. That's not the case. They were not buried by they could have been, but not all fossils and not all organisms were buried by meters and meters of sediment in order to be fossilized. A lot of that sediment has been laid down over the eons since the organisms died. In some cases, at least millennia since the organism died.
It is the flood of Noah's time. Now, God flooded the whole earth during the time of Noah. He had a reason for doing it. The earth had become corrupt, filled with violence. He regretted that he'd made man, and the flood is a judgment upon humanity and a judgment upon the earth.
And a judgment upon the animals and the plants and the fungi and the with all the other archaea and bacteria. All those things are being punished because in a garden some lady ate an apple. That is the reason why we have fossils. Mm-hmm.
We've seen recently here, even in our country, the devastating effects of a hurricane and what a flood can do to the earth and all that's on it.
It's not making the case you think you're making, bud. You're saying that these kind of things happen in real time that we can view and demonstrate.
And here we're talking about a flood that only lasted a few hours. We're talking about a storm surge of maybe, 10 feet? It might have been a little bit higher. Last I heard, it was only about 10 feet. And you look at the devastation that came from just a few hours flood of a few 10 feet of a storm surge. Imagine a flood so great that the earth was covered. Imagine that it was covered it rained for 40 days and nights, but the earth was actually covered for about a year by this flood. Imagine what that would have done to the sediment, to the forest, to the face of the earth. It would have had devastating effects. All of animals would have been buried in the flood waters, in the sediment as it settled. And indeed, we believe this is why it was this flood event that gave us the sedimentary layers that we see, like at a place like if you see it like the Grand Canyon, where you see the various layers. This is what we believe it came from there. So the fossil, this is an important thing, because many people talk about the fossils without thinking, how do we get the earth? How do we get fossils all over the earth? If the flood,
because you just demonstrated one way that these events happen. A hurricane is a good flood catalyst. Also, the monsoon seasons, rivers annually flood. That'll grab up anything that's died in the floodplain the last few months. Since the last flood season, it'll gather up all the bones, especially the megafauna, and wash them on down river, where they'll tend to collect in batches if it's all from the same floodplain, or get washed up in the same area and collect in a mound. And then, like I was saying before, we get a layer of sediment over them. Maybe not even get a layer of sediment over them. Maybe just organic material growing over top of them, funguses and plants growing over top of them over multiple generations, submerge them deep into the soil. Yeah, this idea that it has to be rapid. There's a certain notion to how articulate and how much of an organism remains that does come into play. That say that had to been rapid for it to be in this position and this much of it preserved. But if you find, I mean, just a single bone can be absorbed into the earth just over seasonal changes, over seasonal plant and fungus and other organisms die back and cover it in soil, taking them back into the earth, or taking it right back to the earth. It doesn't even have to start off buried.
Flood happened. If the flood occurred, as the Bible says, and if it did cover the earth, you say there's not enough water. Well, certainly there's enough water. There actually is enough water. If the earth did not have mountains or valleys, there'd be enough water. Are you ready for this? To cover the whole earth, I believe 2 miles deep. 2 miles deep with all the water that's even presently on the earth right now. So what did we have? It was during this cataclysmic event. It did more than just rain. You understand that it falls and said the deeps were broken up, that water came from the depths of.
Yeah. So, but it's not even a matter of where the water came from. I can grant you that there was enough water that there was enough water in the environment to cover that. I can say that before the flood that there was that much water on the earth, or hidden in the fountains of the deep and outside the windows of the heavens and all that good stuff. My question to you is, where did it go? Where did the water end up? I don't understand. Where did it go back into the fountains of the deep? And if so, where are these fountains? And can we explore them and find the water? And is the composition of the water the same as the composition of the surface water? Did it get sucked back out to the windows? Where are these windows of heaven that are opening up and pouring in the flood waters? Where are they? And can we observe them? And can we look at, is there more water beyond the windows? You raise more questions than answers, whereas the model that we use for the fossilization process, outside of the Bible, of course, is a naturalistic process that fits and matches with the observations. Because as I was talking about before with Mark in the side chat, modern species are found in subfossil state, and then there are organisms that are found in both fossilized and subfossil states, which were mostly we have a lot of mammalian megafauna that crosses over from having representatives from like the Miocene, Oligocene, that are fossilized, and then organisms from more recent eras, like the Pleistocene, that are not fossilized. We can see proboscideans are a good example of that. That's the elephant group in that clade, right? So we have a representation of the fossilization process through the ages, and at what point organisms that we're finding are subfossil and non-subfossil. So we have different classes of these bones and things that we're finding in these fields, not just one layer where everything's laid down the same and they're all in a uniform state.
The earth, the continents seem to collide. The mountains, probably many of the mountains formed during this time. And this is why we have the fossils that are found up on top of mountains. They were submerged in water, and the plate tectonics, the crash, there were earthquakes during this time. It was a cataclysmic event, more than just rain.
And I'm not even going to bring up and hold him accountable for the heat problem, because I don't think that Tom has even considered that. But yeah, there's what he's talking about with the mountains crashing into each other, with the continents crashing into each other, and fountains of the deep opening, and springs and rain and all that. The heat is going to be an issue. Mount Everest sprung up in 4,000 years. Must have made trade routes between China and India more difficult. Yeah, I know, like the road just all of a sudden, boom, because they had 4,000 years ago, there's commerce. They had marketplaces in these countries where all of a sudden mountains are springing up between civilizations and making it harder for them to interact. That sucks. Yeah, there's history 4,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago. We have 10,000 years ago, we have foundations of civilizations that there are civilizations that have been ongoing. But yeah, so I just wanted to comment on that. Let's see here, Big Bad Mama. It's called the Big Bad Mama film series. Angie Dickerson is Big Bad Mama.
This would have been perhaps how the mountain ranges were formed.
We
and
love
how
you, Big
fossils
Bad
could be found,
Mama.
therefore, on top of the mountains, because they weren't there at the beginning of the flood. This life died, and the mountains emerged during this time. So this raises some questions. How do you account for if you're going to ask an evolutionist about the fossil record, how do you account for complex forms of life being found in the supposedly oldest layers in the geological column? This is the first question we want to ask, because keep in mind, they believe that the layers that are the furthest down are the oldest layers. What we believe is that they were just the ones that they weren't that much older. They were just laid down in the flood, and that layer settled there first, and another layer settled on top, another layer settled on top. But there's complex life. These trilobites, for instance, these are complex life fossils that were found in this oldest layer.
That's not even close to true. The earliest life that we have is was it 4.2 billion years ago, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 4.2, and then part of my brain saying it was 2.4, and I've transposed it in my brain. So, I've transposed it. So I think it's 4.2 though. And the Cambrian explosion, which he cited in his previous slide as the lowest layer, was 500 some million years ago. So like a fraction of the time ago, it's not even close to the same time frame. The earliest life, 3.6 or 3.7. That might be right. I thought they moved it back to 4.2. But 4.2 that'd be almost Hadean, right? Yeah. Then there's the Ediacaran. All these organisms that existed well before the Cambrian explosion. And Cambrian explosion is a misnomer anyway, because the explosion is a 50 million year period. 50 million years is if you went back in time 50 million years, you would be looking at a post-apocalyptic world that was it only just started to revive from the KT extinction event. Like recently, within just a few million years ago, the world would still be in turmoil from that extinction event. And there were certain areas, of course, that were prospering. But yeah, just to give you an idea how long 50 million years is, basically as long as the age of mammals since the dinosaurs died till now, it's within that same time range. So 50 million years is a long time for organisms to diversify in response to ecological pressures of the environment, other organisms in the environment. We see giant shifts. The Cambrian explosion itself was poignantly an end to an era of this where we had just these microbial mats that just covered everything, at least everything underwater, just covered the entire beds of the oceans. And then with the Cambrian explosion, suddenly we had, and it was these acorn worms that really started the process. They started doing that started just burrowing right into it, and it started breaking up these mats, and other organisms, trilobites, like you mentioned, and things like that, but more primitive organisms as well, started to develop during this time frame and break up these mats and totally change the face of the planet. And that's why we have what we call the Cambrian explosion, because all of a sudden there were these new hard-bodied organisms that were taking advantage of this new ecology that never existed before, because again, everything was uniform before. It was just these big microbial mats of transitional organisms. It's funny to say because they're single-celled organisms that were living in colonies, right? But we move forward from there, and then they started having hard bodies, and we have this amazing fossil record because there was nothing that was breaking down these hard-bodied organisms. And due to the nature of the environment, the calcified remains were easily absorbed into the substrate and fossilized. And then millions of years later, we had tectonic movement that pushed these former seabeds up into mountain ranges, and now we have things like the Burgess Shale right in the middle of the Rocky Mountains that was once a shallow, warm seabed with a plethora of organisms from this era that he's talking about.
No question. Why, after 160 years of searching, have evolutionists not found one single genuine transitional link in the fossil record? That's a good, that's a controversial question, because they would say they have, and yet we would say they haven't.
So Dapper Dino has a fun slide that he does when he has to step away. It's just a slide of hundreds of transitional fossils. I wish I could borrow it for just to respond to this, but he's going to dig into our feather boy over here. So let's give him a chance to let's give him some more rope.
And I have over here on that slide, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, you'll have to picture this yourself. But if you see, there's a fossil here of what's known as Archaeopteryx. Now, Archaeopteryx is a strange fossil, because what is it? Is it a bird? Is it a dinosaur? What is it? We can't really know.
Yes, to both. It's a bird and it's a dinosaur. Because you can't be a bird without being a dinosaur. Dinosauria is a clade of archosaur reptiles. Reptiles being, to keep it monophyletic, reptiles includes birds. Birds are reptiles. Okay, so archosaurs they've branched off from the other reptile groups like lepidosaurs, lizards and snakes, and testuodine turtles. The archosaurs branched off, and you have crocodilians like crocodiles. You have pterosaurs, the quintessential pterodactyls, and then you have some clades of smaller reptilian groups as well that fall into this group. And then you have Dinosauria. So early on, after the Permian extinction event, these groups really started to diversify. And at first, in the early Triassic, the crocodilians, that clade of archosaurs itself, really took the lead and became the dominant organisms for a long time. But dinosaurs did find their origins during the Triassic, during this period of crocodilian supremacy, which did last for most of the Triassic. You had they almost filled like a theropod like niche. Look at some of the Crotosuchians. I think that's still the proper term. They've changed. They've regrouped it again. So like things like para or pseudo crocodilians, para crocodilians are all now nested under crocodilians, which is kind of ironic because their name means beside, right? Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, dinosaurs rose among this group of archosaur reptiles. Dinosaurs kind of took the lead, right? There were these small, tiny, fast-running little creatures, but then they kind of dominated for the rest of the Mesozoic era, and we ended up with the giant sauropods and the huge theropods. Now the theropods, the huge ones, might have seemed like the most successful group at the time, but it was really the small generalists that were able to find and carve out a niche for themselves, and those were the Maniraptorans. Now, Maniraptorans, there were some huge ones. There's some very massive Maniraptorans, but for the most part, they're small, light, hollow-boned. We'll call them bird-like, which is kind of funny since birds are within this group, the Maniraptorans. But then dromaeosaurs are also in the Maniraptorans. Those are like Velociraptor in that group, and they actually look more like birds than what you see in like the movies, like Jurassic Park movies and things like that. But I digress. The ones that survived this next extinction event were the aves, the modern birds. Okay, so there are Maniraptorans. Maniraptorans are theropods. Theropods are dinosaurs. That is nested cladistics. So all birds are Maniraptorans, all modern birds, because Maniraptora is a group of birds are a group of Maniraptorans. All Maniraptorans are theropods because Maniraptorans are a group of theropods, like within that group, and so forth, all the way back to Archosaurs. You could go even further back to amniotes and tetrapods and vertebrates and so forth. You never outgrow your ancestor.
Oh, and this has been put forth as a transitional form by many evolutionists. And yet I've got to think back in my own life to a time when at the University of Maryland, we brought in a paleontologist to give a lecture on creation evolution. His name was Dr. Parker. And his first name's slipping me right now, but Dr. Parker's written a number of books. Well, anyway, he gave this talk. Afterwards, and I was someone known on the campus there at Maryland because I preach every day, and I got to know the head of the zoology department, and he came to the lecture, and there's a lot of students there. And afterwards, I asked him, I said, what did you think of the lecture? And the professor said, well, he's disappointed. He said, I expected more depth to it. I expected better, more rigorous questions to be raised. He said, it was just straw man arguments. I said, well, what do you mean? Give me an example. He said, well, like, for instance, Archaeopteryx. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, listen, no real evolutionists, no real scientists has believed Archaeopteryx is a transitional form in over 40 years.
False. It's because you changed the terminology of what a transitional form is. So all species are in some stage of transition, whether you're experiencing a radiation event or not, is what's going to see rapid physiological or morphological changes in an organism. Is if something's spurning forward, it's radiation, like an extinction event that causes a niche vacuum where organisms that did not formerly live in a specific environment or fill a specific ecological niche find success in that ecological niche after the previous placeholders have gone extinct. That's a niche vacuum that will cause organisms to undergo physiological, behavioral, and even dietary changes in their anatomy that's present in the fossils that they leave behind of that generation. But for the most part, organisms, for most of the time that a species exists, if there's stability in the ecosystem, will remain largely unchanged or only experience subtle morphological changes.
I was a little taken aback by that. I didn't know what to think. And he said he's disappointed. Then right after that, a zoology student, when he left, our conversation was over, a zoology student who attended a lecture, he came and said, what did he say to you? He's the head of our zoology department. What did he say? And I told him what he said about Archaeopteryx being a straw man. No one believes it. He said, well, that's interesting, because just today in my Zoology 400 class, our professor, who knew that we were going to be coming to this lecture tonight, said, how do we know evolution is true? And he gave Archaeopteryx as an example of a transitional form in the fossil record as proof of evolution's true.
Why would Archaeopteryx not be a transitional species? I don't understand the case being made here. I've heard people say that because there were because there were birds discovered older than true birds discovered that are older than Archaeopteryx, but I don't understand how that means that it's not a transitional form, because it still shows the characteristics of when theropods started transitioning to, because the Archaeopteryx could be a branch that moved into an environment where it didn't need to change much and stayed static in that environment, whereas another lineage went on to an environment where it did require physiological changes in order to thrive under the environmental pressures, where only the ones that had certain characteristics survive, things like the teeth, for instance, vanishing from. And there are early birds that had teeth. Most of the birds, I believe, that existed in the Mesozoic had teeth. So, that there could have been another branch that came off of this to lead to modern birds does not change the fact that Archaeopteryx has transitional characteristics from Dinosauria to the Aves clade. They're still in the same. They're still in this, wrapped up in that same group.
I got back with the chairman of the department. I said, and I told him the story. I completed the circle. I said, you told me no legitimate scientist has believed this, and yet this is being taught in your zoology classes in your department. What do you think about that? And he said, well, and his answer was, I don't have control over what they say. And he kind of skirted the issue. My friends, what do we say?
Stirred the issue. Sounds like he just told you that, hey, I don't write the curriculum. I mean, maybe he said more. I don't know.
Some of the people who make such confident assertions maybe shouldn't be so confident after all. Now, I'm going to admit there's much to learn about the area of fossils. And as I've said throughout this entire series, I hope you understand.
Look, okay, so we will never say about any fossil that we found that this individual organism is a direct ancestor to a modern different clade that evolved from the same group. We will never say that this individual dinosaur, that this individual theropod is the direct ancestor of birds. We won't say that based on a fossil. We will say this individual was part of a clade that is either a sister clade or ancestral to this derived clade. We're never going to say that this individual fossil that we found here in the ground, or even that this individual species of the fossil we found in the ground is the direct ancestor of a group, unless we see it in real time, which does happen. We do see speciation in real time, especially in the domestication process. But there's enough genetic changes, for instance, in the wolf clade to designate dog as its own species, and we've done that in real time. I think he does a prayer here, but if he starts praying, I'm going to probably end it. But let's let him finish up.
I ask myself, if I'm going to be a creationist or an evolutionist, which are the difficult questions I'm most comfortable not having good answers to yet? There's still great research being done. I will admit that if, as a creationist, there are tough questions that we're still struggling with. We don't claim to have found all of it. We're presenting a paradigm, a model that to us makes sense, and it provides a great deal of answers that fit right in with the Bible. If you see it in light of, for instance, in this case, the worldwide flood, if you believe it really happened, as the Bible says, suddenly the whole fossil record takes on a whole new perspective. Because how do we get those fossils? Was it laid down quickly?
Suddenly the whole fossil record doesn't make any sense, right? Like, why are all the dinosaurs fossilized, but not all the proboscideans and percydactyls, these other huge organisms? Why are none of them? Why are some of them subfossil and then all of the dinosaurs are subfossil? I guess the bone density should be about comparable, right? The body mass would be comparable. I know that the Dinosauria does make better use of mass to weight ratio, so they are similar mass. Dinosauria is going to be Dinosaurian. A similar mass dinosaur is going to be much lighter than the same mass of like a mammalian or mammal. I keep using the scientific classification. I don't have to use that with you guys. I mammal and dinosaur. A dinosaur and a mammal that look the same size, the mammal's going to weigh substantially more. But the dinosaur can potentially be equally as strong. That's why a 35-pound eagle can tangle with a 150-pound gray wolf and sometimes come out on top, because the ratio there, we do get ratioed pretty hard by birds, pound for pound.
Really that old? Are these layers really that old? And so are these fossils really that old? You begin to see things in a whole different light if you look at it in light of the historical account in the scripture. There's questions, I believe, that if you're going to have the evolutionist, the old earth point of view, there's tough questions that can't be answered by them. And if you're going to have ours, there's tough questions that we don't have the answers yet either. Which set of questions am I most comfortable not being answered? Well, I go with the Bible. And I feel that there's so much. We creationists have such limited budgets. We have such limited resources. The other side has, like every university in America, the Smithsonian, the big museums, the big budgets. We are doing so much with so little, and yet I believe putting forth a real argument that it happened just as the Bible says. And so that's where I stand. The fossil record.
But you're where you stand. The fossil record doesn't actually make sense, though. The flood model does not explain the deposition of fossils and what is fossilized and what's not fossilized, where fossils are found, what types of fossils are found in what layers of the geological column. The geological column is a whole in and of itself. Tectonic activity, all of that goes out the window with the flood model. None of what we understand about any of those things makes any sense. And this is because this has real time application, because we're talking about ecology here too, which is the way organisms move and why organisms are where they are, why organisms were where they were, and what types of environments existed in this area and for how long, which really throws a big ass monkey wrench into this flood model when they say that all of the layers were laid down in one day, because it's not layers of just mud with fossils in them. It's layers of ecologies. It's layers of, here's a forest, now there's a desert, now there's a swamp, now there's an ocean, now there's a desert, now there's an ocean, now there's this forest. It's layered like that. It's not just mud with different kinds of fossils in it. There's different ecosystems that thrived in that area. I tried to explain that to Cindy Lincoln, but she just I don't think that she was really following what I was saying. I'd love to talk to her one-on-one.
Father in heaven, we bless you today and we worship you. And we think today, as we think of fossils, Lord, we could sit and argue about it. But
okay, we're going to stop right here because I'm not going to listen to him pray. That's a personal thing he does with his religious audience. I'm not going to disparage them for praying. Lots of cultures pray. It's not for me. Not my cup of tea. So that was Creation Watch with what's this channel called again? It's Tom Short, but his channel's called Tom Short too. I thought he had it named after, this is like, he calls himself Tom the Preacher. That's his website, tomthepreacher.com. So I wasn't sure, but yeah, his channel is just called Tom Short. Yeah, and not very compelling on the arguments for flood geology. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is, and this will be, there's just two little short parts. I'm at 2 hours already. Again, we had some delays this morning, so it kind of set things off. But I do want to discuss something called Tarantism. Now, this again links back to one I was talking to with Chris on Thursday night. Tarantism is a form of hysterics, and we don't use the term hysterics anymore, but it's it originated in Italy. Originally, and where it gets its name from is spider-based, because the original tarantula is actually a lycosid wolf spider. This the species that is called, the name comes from, is called Lycosa tarantula, or Lycosa tarantula, as we would say it today. Anyhow, it was believed that when this thing bit you, that you would exhibit this need to dance, this manic dancing. It's like dancing mania. It's really a weird reaction. Now, historically speaking, if it was actually derived from some kind of spider bite, they do think that the Lycosis tarantula is, and again, it's not a tarantula, it's a wolf spider, is not a good candidate, but maybe Latrodectus Tridescagitatus. Yeah, that's the 13-spotted black widow native to Southern Europe. They think that was the origins to it, but I don't think there's any spider origins to it at all. The bite itself is then you fall into this dancing manic state, and it will actually spread to other people around you. This again, they call it mass hysteria back in the day, but we call it mass psychogenic illness now. Dancing manias are pretty common in that area. So there are, of course, other characteristics that come into play too. I'm going to read you a quick quote of the description of this in medieval times, when this was actually something thought to be a true experience. When one is in the hold of this ill-wished beast. One has 100 different feelings at a time. One cries, dances, vomits, trembles, laughs, pales, cries, faints, and one will suffer great pain. And finally, after a few days, if unaided, you die. Sweat and antidotes relieve the sick, but the sovereign and only remedy is music. So you got to turn on some jams and dance if you get bit by one of these spiders. And we found that the poorest peasants oppressed with difficult breathing, and we observed also that the face and hands had started to become black, and cause his illness was known to all. A guitar was brought, whose harmony immediately that he was understood began first moving his feet, legs shortly afterwards. He stood on his knees. Soon after an interval, he arose and swayed. Finally, in the space of a quarter of an hour, he was leaping nearly 3 palms from the ground, sighed, but with such great impetus that it terrorized bystanders. And before an hour, the black was gone in his hands and face, and he had regained his native color. So we got modern interpretations of this, definitely as a mass psychogenetic illness and the effects and on display there. So interesting little aspect of history, and what do you say? Archaic diagnosis is, of course, hysteria in and of itself is an archaic diagnosis as well. All right, so now moving on from this, I got one last little thing to go over, and it shouldn't just take but a couple of minutes to break down for y'all. We are going to revisit a place that is near and dear to my heart. It is a place called Lord Howe Island. And once upon a time, there was a rare species of giant stick insects that lived on this island. Shipwrecked on this island. I have a whole video about it. Came out, I think it was not this last Halloween, but the Halloween before last, where I explained the history of these stick insects. But shipwrecked on the island, rats got onto the island. The stick insects were thought to be extinct until one of the rocky formations, a little ways away, like a quarter mile away from the main island, they discovered that the stick insects were still alive, took them into captivity, rapidly bred them. There was last time I checked, there was like 50,000 now in captivity, and they were going to re-release them onto the island. But the stick insects themselves weren't the only ones that suffered from this rat infestation. There were also a species of birds on the island that we will never see again, multiple species. The face of the Lord Howe Islands was forever changed by this event, a shipwreck with some rats. However, another species, and maybe less charismatic than the stick insect, at least in the public eye. For people who know me, know my channel, they know I'm going to say this, and y'all are going to be like, oh, I am a roach girl. I love my roaches. I have more roaches in my collection, more species of roaches in my collection than any other insect. I have more roaches, orders of magnitude more roaches in my collection than any other invertebrate at all. Doubly so, orders of magnitude more. I have colonies because roaches live in colonies. At least the species that I have do. And I'm a roach girl, and I'm okay with that. And anybody who enters my life needs to be okay with that too. However, there was a species of wood roach, and wood roaches aren't your it's a pest species. Now these live in the forest. They live on the floor of the forest. Palmetto bugs are ones we see in the US a lot. They don't want to be inside human houses. They don't thrive there. They thrive in warm environments, and they come out after dark and feed on the forest floor. They generally are scavengers, detritivores, and sometimes carnivorous, rarely though. However, wood roaches on Lord Howe Island were a distinct species because of its isolation, right? So they were thought to be extinct for 80 years. This is a very similar story to what we had with the stick insects. Thought that this went to the way of the dodo, as they say. So I'm going to read this article real quick here. The Lord Howe Island wood-feeding cockroach, Panethisia lata, long believed to be extinct on the main island of Lord Howe Island. The wood-feeding cockroach was found at the foot of a single banyan tree. The interesting thing about when they say wood-feeding cockroaches is cockroaches, as a clade themselves, Blatividae, they are able to break down wood fiber. It's very special ability that they have that all roaches have to some extent. Now, there's one clade of roaches that went to the extreme with this and became wood feeding specialists. Today, we know them as termites. So, burst your bubble. Termites are just a specialized clade of roaches that have tapped into the wood feeding benefits that come from being a roach and specialized in that, became hyper eusocial in the process. I'm going to go off on tangents like that, but a University of Sydney biology student has uncovered a large wingless wood-eating cockroach that was believed to be extinct since the 1930s and is unique to Australia's Lord Howe Island. For the first 10 seconds or so, I thought, no, it can't be, said Maxim Adams, an honors student under Professor Nathan Lowe at the University of Sydney's School of Biological Science. I mean, I lifted the first rock under this huge banyan tree, and there it was. We found families of them all under this one banyan tree, said senior scientist Nicholas Carlisle of the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment, further known as the DPE, who was with Adams exploring North Bay, a secluded white sandy beach only accessible by foot or water. In fact, Maxim and Nathan were there for the rest of the week, looked under every other banyan in North Bay and didn't find anything. It's the rare Lord Howe Island wood-feeding cockroach, Panethisia lata, which was previously common across the archipelago. I always trip on that word too. It's fun to say. Was believed to have become extinct when rats arrived on the island in 1918, as I covered previously when I was talking about the stick insects. Over the next several decades, searches uncovered scattered populations of close relatives on two tiny offshore islands. However, the rediscovered group is genetically distinct from them. The survival is great news, as it has been more than 80 years since it was last seen, said Lord Howe Island Board Chair Atticus Fleming about the find, first made in July 2022. So this is very recently. And I think when I did my stick insects video, I actually mentioned this as an extinct species from the island. So now that's been updated, I guess. Woo! Lord Howe Island really is a spectacular place. It's older than the Galapagos Island and is home to 1,600 native invertebrate species, half of which are found nowhere else in the world. It really is, for insect lovers, it's like a hotbed of amazing, unique creatures. These cockroaches are almost like our own version of Darwin's finches, separated on little islands over thousands of or millions of years, developing into their own unique genetics, he added. Although they may not be cute and cuddly, cockroaches play a crucial role in the island's ecosystem by recycling nutrients, accelerating the decomposition of logs, and serving as a food source for other animals. For this reason, the experts have been looking into the viability of reintroducing them from the offshore islands to the mainland. Or sorry, from the offshore islets to the main island. Now they no longer have to. There is still so much to learn, said Professor Lowe, head of the molecular ecology, evolution, and phylogenetics MEEP lab. I like that, MEEP, in the School of Life and Environmental Sciences. We are hoping to study their habits, we are hoping to study their habitat, behavior, and genetics and learn more about how they managed to survive through further experiments on the island. The wingless cockroach is 22 to 40 millimeters long with a metallic body color that varies from reddish to black. Australia hosts 11 species of Panacea wood cockroaches, powerful burrowers that live inside and feed on rotten logs in rainforests and open forests in the coastal northern and eastern Australia. They carry specialized microorganisms in their gut that help digest the cellulose in the wood. Females give birth to nymphs, which stay in family groups with the adults, but the unique arthropods behave differently and may have been misnamed. Despite its common name suggesting they are wood-feeding cockroaches and that they burrow in rotting logs, we now believe they are more of a rock roach, with rocks forming an important component of their habitat, possibly due to their coevolution alongside the ground foraging Lord Howe Island woodhen, said DPE's Carlisle, who was part of the team of scientists that rediscovered the Lord Howe Island stick insect in 2001 on Ball's Pyramid. That's the offshore island, a volcanic outcrop 23 kilometers off the coast of Lord Howe Island. The University of Sydney led the research in partnership with New South Wales Department of Planning and Environmental and Lord Howe Island Museum. The research was funded by Australia and Pacific Science Foundation and Australia Research Council. So that is the return of the Lord Howe wood-feeding roach. Pretty fantastic in my opinion. And I hope that we find more returning organisms thought to be extinct on the Lord Howe Island and any other island that has experienced one of these mass extinction events. Insects often get overlooked when it comes to the detrimental effects that the Anthropocene has had on the ecology of these islands. Often we focus on birds and mammals that went extinct that were unique and endemic to the islands, but there are a multitude of insects that we will never see, that naturalists will never get to observe. And unlike things like the moa and the elephant bird, don't leave large bone fossils in their wake for us to understand what they looked like and how they lived. Insects are not as common in the fossilization process other than amber. So many of them will never even get to learn about. They went extinct by competition with invasive species well before they were ever discovered by man. And it makes me sad to think about all of the organisms that we will never get to see, never even know that existed. But I'll do my damnedest to help catalog all the ones that do. And if there's ever a chance that I could raise species in the hive myself, oh my God, that would be amazing. But I do like roaches. I am happy to see that this one's coming back. I think that roaches are so misunderstood. So hold on, let me see what Mark's talking about here. That student would be absolutely thrilled. That's a high distinction for a unit. They are not European cockroaches that infest houses. They live out in the bush. Yes, I have seen Creepshow. Again, this is very different from the pest species. There's several pest species of cockroach. American cockroaches, Oriental cockroaches, German cockroaches, and I actually have a species of Turkish cockroach that can take hold as a pest species in the right environment. But I keep them contained. They're feeders mostly. They call them red runners in the pet trade, just because calling them cockroaches detours people. Wood roaches are they don't like living in people's houses. They don't do infestations and things like that. You might see them like running around the side. Wood roaches are what you see running around the sidewalk outside when it's warm at night, like when you're out for a walk or whatever, skittering across the sidewalk, or maybe hanging around a dumpster or a waste receptacle or trash can. Even they'll hang around there where there's decay that they can consume. So that's what they specialize in, consuming decay, and that's very important in any ecology. Their wings are actually a pretty dark orange color, and I kind of like them, although they can scare the crap out of you if you don't know they are there and fly at you. Are you talking about, I think you may have said earlier on. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, Australian black cockroaches. They're wood roaches too, I'm assuming. I don't know the common names of everything. Are they in the same clade, Panthesia? Have a fix for roaches and spiders. Yeah, I have. I love arthropod in general. That's why this is HiveScience. That's why my visuals and my theme on my channel has bugs. I know I talk about more than bugs. Mainly my channel is a debunking channel, but with the bug aesthetics. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up here. I may see who's streaming and pop into someone's stream for a panel, but I have to go to the bathroom and get something to eat first. But and if not, if I can't find anything to do, I may go out and watch or listen to that Machine Elves video from Terrence McKinnon, McKenna, and see what I think of it. I don't know yet, but it's been good to see everybody and hang out with everybody. We've had a pretty stable viewership since we started. We've been keeping people stimulated. So I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. If you all keep liking what I'm doing here at Live from the Hive, and keep coming back, I will keep returning and doing this show for you. Please remember to be kind, take care, and we'll see you next time.